And we're live. With a little bit of luck, we're live. Hello, I'm Robin Vincent, and welcome to another Molten Chat. I have with me this evening Steve from THONK, as he will be reliably known, I imagine. But before we kick off, do let us know in the chat if you can see and hear us. So Steve, give us a wave and say something really dazzling.
Hello, I am Steve.
Good.
Did that work?
Yeah, hopefully. So let us know in the chat that you can hear us, and then we'll get on with whatever it is we're doing. Now, I'm set up slightly differently, although I've noticed that when I turn to look over here, I'm actually looking at Steve, which works brilliantly. So it's almost as if I'm like
just looking in my ear. No,
looking in your ear. Yeah. See, that's working. Yeah. First time I see and hear Steve. Yes, I've had some yeses and some woohoos. So as I say, my setup's slightly differently because I had everything set up in my soldering station over there for the other live streams, and it was very difficult to bring it all back over here. So I'm kind of sideways. Everything I need to do is here, but the camera's over here. So I'm just going to have to deal with that in my own brain, and hopefully it'll all work out. So bear with me if you get a lot of the side of my head. Good, right. So this is Steve from THONK. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, good. It's craziness at THONK this week because we're doing our annual stock take, which is when we work out everything that's missing or everything we've got 1,000 more of. So yeah, it's a bit of a crazy one.
So, and you've also had a couple of weeks sort of shut down in order to catch up with, I guess, the COVID rush.
Yeah. It's oh God, there's so many things. It's the COVID rush. It's lots. Obviously, everyone at least a few months ago very much stuck at home, and the people want things to do with their hands. But then also, it's taken us a lot longer to do what we normally do because we're social distancing. We're kind of back up to speed now. But then we had this constant delay on shipping orders that we just couldn't shift. So we had to shut for a few periods. But also, it's what it's really shown is how much the whole community as a whole is a one functioning thing. Because as other stores also had some similar issues, Modular Attic was shut for a month or something like that. That caused a massive influx in customers for us because they weren't there, and then that slowed us down. So I don't know if you'd call it a positive, but it's certainly shown how interconnected everything is, and you can't have a knock-on in one part without affecting everything else.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we like to center the worlds around ourselves, and we're never thinking of the guy you used to buy coffee from when you used to go to work, or the all those sort of knock-on effects of the situation that we find ourselves in. But I mean, it was from an outsider's point of view, it seems like if you're having to shut in order to fulfill orders, then that's got to be a good place to be, a solid place to be. I mean, you've been going 8 years now, is that right?
Yeah, it's 8 years, and I mean, it was definitely a test of whether we were doing things in the most efficient way possible. Certainly, but there's companies going bust left, right, and centre. To have too much work to do is the best problem to have at the moment. But yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, the other thing is we have so much new stuff that we just haven't been able to get on sale because we're still shipping, and that has a knock-on effect on the manufacturers and suppliers as well. Everyone's very patient, but the truth is we're going to have so much new stuff coming online between now and Christmas that we're just going to work every hour of the day, I think.
Well, it's one of those things you've got to make hay with the sun shines, I suppose. So tell us about THONK. I only know it as a website. I mean, I'm assuming that you have a store of some fashion. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we don't have a walk-in store where customers can walk in. It's purely online. I mean, we do build workshops though in our space, which obviously right now is not something we're doing. But no, we're very much online, and it doesn't really lend itself to a physical store because we have thousands and thousands of tiny little things. So presenting it on a website is the way to make it palatable to people.
Well, there's always the Tandy model, isn't there, where you have a counter and you have to go and ask for stuff, and the 16-year-old kid goes and wanders off for half an hour trying to find the resistor you asked for. I seem to remember.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone has any particularly positive. Oh no, I don't know. We had a Maplin around the corner, and I was gutted.
Yeah, Maplin,
gutted when it. Yeah, but it was Tandy, wasn't it, as well? But the focus has always been presenting it in a way to make sense to people who aren't engineers, and and doing it online makes that really easy. But I mean, we've grown from just me in my bedroom with boxes of stuff under my bed 8 years ago to 10 of us now. So we still don't really meet demand, is the truth. But I don't know. I always want to grow it sustainably so that we're not rushing ahead of ourselves. And so there's certainly big gaps on the site. There's loads of other stuff we could stock, and we'll get to it. But I want to do it properly. So,
well, I worked in retail a long time, from '96 to 2005. I was at Turnkey in Charing Cross Road, so I'm very familiar with the whole trying to run a shop, trying to deal with customers. And I think I've felt ever since I started in work that I'm always 2 weeks behind, and taking the opportunity to block out 2 weeks to stop everything, I think is just brilliant. It's something that was simply impossible. The management would never even consider the idea of stopping for a moment, even if it would drastically improve our situation, because we always felt we were in catch up. It's just a nutty thing to do. So it's in Brighton, where you are?
We're in Brighton, yeah. So I've been living in Brighton about 15 years, and before that I was living in London, and then in Bournemouth for a little while as well. And my background is I was a game developer. I was a game designer and a sound designer on kind of console video games.
Anything we would have heard of? That's not rude.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked at a bunch of companies from the mid-90s. There was Codemasters, Argonaut, spent a while at Lego as well.
Telltale or Tell?
No, it was before that. I mean, I was actually more based in Denmark, and they were working on some kind of music game ideas.
Oh, right.
But this was when they weren't. It was before the Telltale stuff, and to be honest, Telltale got it right. And then more lately, I managed the audio department at a developer called Relentless in Brighton. I guess I worked on the Micro Machines games, which are probably some of the better known ones, but that's a long time ago. And then, just tons. It was 15 years, so it was a lot of stuff. But the games industry is really volatile. I got made redundant so many times, which is just normal. Anyway, I was spending all my evenings just tinkering with synths. Even when I was doing sound design at work, it was, I was just messing with synths. And then I think there was just a happy coincidence of me not wanting to commute because I was about to have kids, and the explosion in the DIY forum on the Muffwiggler forum about 10 years ago, and it just kind of just seemed to mesh together exactly right. And THONK just became obvious there was a big need for it, really.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds a bit like Matt Tech Modular's story as well. He started selling getting modules and then getting them for other people, and then it sort of a business grew from there. So what drew you to the idea of building your own stuff?
I kind of like absurdity. I've always done jobs that are absurd somehow, either like sound design jobs where you're just cutting up thousands and thousands of WAVs and trying to stick them together in a way that works. Or the way I kind of make music as well was always a very labor intensive thing, and that whole thing with the bill of materials and trying to work out the cheapest way to get it all together just kind of, I don't know, appeals to my brain. And I love poring over data in spreadsheets. That's the kind of sad geek I am.
I've experienced that myself, in that you sent me a spreadsheet in order to give me some links to show some bits and pieces. Turned up with a spreadsheet. When does that ever happen? So yeah, no, I get that. I think I do get that.
Yeah. I've always, I guess, always my past has been a very data-driven kind of job, and so I like making systems efficient, and that's kind of what making a video game always was tuning something really raw and gnarly into something that appears something, kind of smooth. So, but I mean, the flip side to that is I just was involved in quite a lot of small underground record labels in the 90s, and both releasing music on them and running a few as well. And THONK really is a bit like a record label, because there's all these people, at least it was when we started, there's all these kind of bedroom artists, you might say, who are the people designing PCBs and designing things to put into Euro. And then they don't want to spend all day queuing at the post office, which is what suddenly was happening when it exploded. And it just became clear that some level of like curating and taking away the bit that the designer shouldn't be doing, the queuing at the post office, and there also, what was happening was there was a library of parts maturing that everyone ended up using in all the Eurorack modules, and it just seemed like a really good chance to try and crystallize that a bit and make it easier for new designers to get involved as well. And the barrier to entry now for someone who wants to make a module is so low compared to how it was. So it was the right time, right place.
Well, I'm all about lowering the barriers to entry to the point that I'm letting all sorts of crazy people in who probably have no business being there. But it's, I mean, I got into Eurorack only relatively recently. I think it was 2017. I was the first synth fest I was at, so only 3 years, maybe 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was probably a year before I thought of building anything, because you go through levels, you go through a bit of a journey, I think, with it. First of all, it's like, oh, Eurorack, this is really, really fascinating. And then I have no money left. What on earth am I going to do now? Because I must feed this monster. And so you start then scanning about, going, oh, right, yeah, people build stuff. Oh, that's interesting, and cheaper, kinda. And so, but one of the interesting things I found was that, I mean, Eurorack was hard to get started in a few years ago. It's got better, a lot better in the last few years, which of course is all my doing, I imagine. But it's hard because it's difficult. It doesn't relate to synthesis in the way that you think it does, and it's expensive, and there's lots of language and terminology that you have to kind of wrap your head around if you're not familiar with that space. It's like when you first subscribe to Sound on Sound magazine, it doesn't make any sense for the first 3 or 4 months, and then you start to tune into the language that's being used. But with DIY, it just, it pivots up a whole level, and you go, oh, crikey, what is all this stuff about? And for me, it's been really interesting. I mean, I have to say that the community that I've come up against have been amazing. Almost entirely amazing, to the point that you just want to say, stop being so nice. I can work some of this out by myself. But they're so enthusiastic and willing to get into it, while at the same time being completely oblivious to how difficult the language is sometimes, and how much there is that they know, because they're in that community, that people on the outside have no clue about. So it's a very sort of passionate, niche sort of place. But I think that now is a time that it should be opening up, and that presents, I think, a whole load of new challenges with how you do that, the dangers of that, the loss of exclusivity, maybe all sorts of those sorts of vibes. I feel in the conversations and live streams and talks about this sort of thing that I've had. But before I waffle too much, I was going to make a point which I'm not sure what that was anymore. Other than perhaps, so when I first started this, when I went looking into what should I build first, the thing that came up was the Turing machine, the music thing, Modular music thing. That's right. Which of course was available through you. Now, and I got the feeling that you and music thing were the same, but not the same. You seem to be this. I wasn't entirely sure how you were connected. Has it been some kind of symbiotic relationship?
Yeah. Well, I'd known about Tom, the designer of music thing stuff, from his music thing blog, which I don't know if you remember, but he was running that blog from, I don't know, mid 2000s. And it was, if you go back and look at it now, and it is archived, it's the journey he took from being a journalist, working on Mixmag and then at the Times, to getting obsessed with the kind of obsessive cultures in music instrument design, which inevitably led him to Eurorack. And so he was someone that I knew about, and then he kind of designed the Turing machine at the point where this explosion was happening in the DIY forums and people were using the Eurorack format, and he put it out open source and kind of said, well, there you go, you can build your own Turing machine now. And it was like the catalyst for me, and I just went, ding, I can totally see how I can turn this into a product. And it was before the website was live, and it just did become a kind of symbiotic thing from there. He wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting it either. And then before long, 200 people wanted one, and I was kind of, I was like, oh God, how am I just going to manage this and not get everyone's address wrong? I'll just quickly make an e-commerce website, and I made THONK, and then it just kept rolling from there. So it was very organic, and then that really buoyed Tom to see so many people wanting it and using it musically and enjoying it, and it just snowballed from there. And other people saw it happen and wanted to do the same thing.
Yeah, people were fascinated to know what went over. It was a helicopter.
And I really liked your Turing machine video, because it's, you were talking about that barrier to entry, or I was, talking about that. And I think the way that you approached that, it was like, actually, it is someone like yourself that I thought, I can help you do this. I can write a visual build doc where actually you don't need to verbally understand what any of these things are. You just need to put them together, and then you can be making music. And we could have taken a decision with THONK to try and teach people about circuit design, and we didn't. That isn't what we're about. If people pick that up through doing the projects and talking about them on forums, that's brilliant. But we decided that the goal for us was to help people enjoy building things, but get to making music quickly. Yeah. So there's plenty of other people who are filling that space of teaching you how to design circuits or understand how they work.
Yeah, well, one of the things with the Turing machine was that the manual was fantastic. It was resistor by resistor, pretty much, I think, if I recall. Everything was photographed, and you could absolutely follow it along with having no clue as to what any of it did. And that's both kind of awesome and genius, but at the same time, now that I'm a year or two into building things, it's starting to make me question what, if anything, I've learnt through making kits. And I'm sort of starting to come to the point now where I'm thinking, I don't actually know. I mean, I have gathered information, some stuff sticks in your head, but I still don't know really what a filter looks like, what the components look like. I don't really know what this row of resistors is doing. And so I'm starting to become aware that there's this next level again, that once you kind of get beyond the kit, is that, you know, there's a whole other load of stuff to try to learn, if one feels so inclined. I mean, I maybe stick around with the kits a bit longer. I think I'm certainly gonna try with a bit of that.
Well, I think that that is and it's recognised. I think in the community, it's recognised that that is an issue, and so, for example, like Erica have cleared the slate and gone, right, okay, let's make all our stuff open source. And I know that their next DIY projects are going to be quite education and focused, so they are not necessarily going to be focused on competing with retail modules in a DIY format, but helping people to understand what's going on as well. And I think we'll keep seeing more things like that. But I mean, the truth is that, you know, half the people who make the modules, they feel exactly the same as you. There's a level that they don't understand either, and then, you know, but like, you know, there's a couple of people who design modules who are kind of PhD level electronics people, and they consider that there's a level above that they don't understand either. So that, you know, I guess you delve into physics eventually, but everyone feels like that. You just got to feel like you've got to find the level that suits you. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, I spoke to Gertz over Superboost, did a Molten chat like this, and I could kind of sense he was a little bit scornful of my kit building, because it was almost like sort of saying to me that, you know, I've seen you make all these kits, and I kind of get the feeling you've learnt nothing. It's like, well, you're probably right. I mean, I've learnt soldering, I've learnt how to handle components, what bits of tools and stuff I need and stuff that I don't. You know, those are the sorts of things I've learnt. But he's right, and I would very much like. I'm trying to work out if I have the space in my head to learn that stuff or to become more interested in it. I'd like to think that I do. I mean, I'm building a Descartes' dream, for heaven's sake. I really should know more than just pick and place resistors and capacitors. But, you know, there's only so much thought I think I can give to these things.
Yeah, and it's really easy to just not end up making any music.
Yes.
Yeah, or even playing your instruments. So I think that's it. That's the most important thing out of all of this, is making sure that you don't lose sight of what it is for you. And for some people, building is everything, you know, and tinkering is everything. But yeah, I don't know. It's still about music ultimately, or sound.
Yeah, no, definitely. That is something that sometimes needs reminding, particularly because I find myself now, I'm working in this industry, so I'm always in that situation where if you're working on music related things during the day, how much do you want to do that when it's your own time? And that's a balance which I think is always a bit of a struggle for the people like myself who are lucky enough to work in the bits that you like, to work in the area of your hobby, I suppose.
Yeah.
But there was one thing that one little nugget that really impressed me over the thoughts of circuit design, and that's is when I first came across Sam Battle, Look Mum No Computer guy.
Yeah.
The first time I became aware of him, it was like, oh, just some crazy dark guy doing crazy things. He's building a synth on a bike, that kind of thing. But the first time I took real notice was when he did a little video where he made a filter on the back of a cornflake packet. And I'm sitting there just going, how the hell did he do that? He's just put a couple of things together and used this sort of pen that painted copper traces or something between bits that it's stuck into. Bits that it's stuck into a piece of cardboard. And it was like, that's just extraordinary. How does he know that stuff? He's just some punky kid. And it's been really interesting seeing where he's gone with that. He does lots of crazy stuff, which is fine. But I do have, tomorrow night, I'm doing some of his Cosmo modules, or at least trying to. And I've come to realise that I don't know anything about this. And his approach is very much assuming that you know. Because he says things like, oh, yeah, you know, you can use that capacitor there, but you don't have to. So
Yeah.
why would I make a decision on that? You know, I'm just putting the thing together. I don't
Yeah.
want to make a decision
Yeah.
on which capacitor to use. That seems nuts. So
Well, that's a really tricky line as well, and that used to happen a lot more. Where that's the thing, you have like that the like our Turing machine manual where you can't get it wrong.
no,
You might not have the dexterity and get it wrong, but certainly, 5-10 years ago there was a lot more of, you might want to try this here or that here, and then for a lot of people that's just like, but I don't even know what a capacitor is. I don't really understand what the difference it makes to try those different values. So it's really hard, and people that's what can scare people as well. And not everyone's the same. Not everyone wants to. It's a really tricky challenge. I hope in the next 5-10 years of THONK we kind of start to solve that as well and find those different paths.
yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to, before I forget, I'm just going to open a beer. But also, I wanted to let people know that the Stasis Leak that I built last night, which was very kindly donated from THONK for the evening. Hang on. Oh, I've got a glass somewhere. It works. It works. I got it to work. The problem was, in the end, that I'd forgotten to solder in one of the pots. I mean, it's a simple mistake. Anyone can make that mistake, I think. I mean, you can stare at that circuit board over and over again, saying, nope, that's fine. You can resolder all the other parts. And then just as I was about to put it down, I turned it at a slightly different angle. I noticed 3 whole pins that weren't soldered. I hadn't even attempted to solder them. And so once I've done that, then yeah, it works. So you'll find all sorts of reverb and delay over things coming to, well, I will, maybe I'll show it tomorrow night before I do the Cosmo thing. I don't know. But anyway, it works. So don't need to worry. It was a simple mistake, just one of those things. And part of it, I think, was because I've been sat there 3 hours trying to do this thing, and it was late. And I was probably had enough at that point. But it's interesting a point you said about whether it's the building of it or whether it's the making music, or is it a combination of those things. And I think in some ways when you start building kits, you have to accept that at some point something's not going to work, and that you're going to burn £100 on a kit that you're just not going to get to function. And so you have to make, I think, that build part of the enjoyment of it, so that you at least get that. If it becomes a bind, or you're only doing it just for the money, or the for the cheaperness, then I think you're going to end up frustrated.
Well, there's a really kind of I don't know how to describe it, but there's a unfortunate truth that you learn so much more when you mess things up. So I swear that probably, some people are very dexterous and they find the soldering very easy, and they find following a list of instructions very easy. Not everyone is as good at those things, and those people probably never make a mistake in putting the wrong part in or putting it in backwards. And yet the people who are a bit are just like me, or regular people who are more clumsy and do make mistakes, that you have to start troubleshooting if you get something wrong. You have to bite the bullet and start to try and understand and learn how to use a multimeter. And that is a weird kind of dichotomy of like, you learn more where you make mistakes. And the thing is, I think the thing to remember is, most Euro manufacturers are probably good at soldering just from doing hours and hours and hours and hours, but some of them aren't. Some of them aren't great either. Some of them are great circuit designers, and so that dexterity and that kind of having good eyesight even isn't actually definitely necessary to get good results. But it's also wound up in that physical act of putting it together that it's hard to separate it. And everybody misses soldering a pot or a whole line of headers or half an IC socket. I mean, you just can't get away from that. That's
So what would be your top tips for troubleshooting then? How do you approach troubleshooting a module?
Go to bed. I'm not joking. I'm so not joking. Like, you know, I did an analysis of what time we get emails from people going, my module is broken, and it's like 90% of them after 11 at night, and some of the most desperate ones are at 3 a.m. You just can't. You can't. You know, if you start in the morning, you'll build much better. And it sounds ridiculous, but it makes so much difference. You're tired. You make mistakes, but sleeping on it really helps. Almost probably 90% of problems are mechanical. They're like, if there's wiring, it'll be to do with bad wiring or the wiring's in the wrong place. You know, having no wiring does reduce problems by such a huge factor. Bad connections between the boards, it can you know, be one of them, and people don't realize the back of the board's hanging off. That can make things very weird. And learning how to use a multimeter to check continuity so that you can just put your meter on one side of the board and then the other on the other side and just check that they're actually connected. Learning how to do that will get you out of so many problems. And then just obviously checking you've not put things in backwards, which you know, everyone does as well. One of the things that is, once you've done all those kind of visual checks, you check that nothing is literally caught fire, or, you know, which isn't common, but it does happen, or you've just missed something or it's backwards, then the thing about, you know, all the PCBs that you buy is the majority of the traces on the boards are power, because the power is wrapping itself around that 12-volt power supplies all over the board. And so a really common thing is that you've created a short circuit between ground and one of the power lines. And when you learn how to just test to make sure there's no connection between the ground on the Euro power header and the power rails, you know, you will often get rid of 50% of problems that way. What a lot of people worry about, and is actually rarely the case, is that they've blown the ICs, or that the chips are bad, or that the firmware isn't loaded properly and things like that. And actually they're very, very rare problems. It's very rare for people to damage chips and transistors these days. We package them carefully in electrostatic packaging because it makes sense, but actually that electrostatic damage is very rare. But people think because we're warning about it that that's what they've done. Oh, they've zapped the chips. They've just forgotten to solder something 99% of the time. You know, it's
definitely. I mean, I worked with computers for building computers for years and years, and I've built hundreds of computers, and I've never blown a CPU or a motherboard. I've dropped things on things to break things, but I've never had the rub the balloon on your head type experience where you zap anything. It's almost unheard of. And yet, as you say, because everything comes in anti-static bags and such like, we're so aware of it, let alone wearing the bloody strap on your wrist, which I don't think I ever have. No.
Well, and all those kind of 90s and 2000s computer components, you know, Pentiums and the RAM back then, they were so much more fragile than things are now as well. And, you know, especially analog electronics, you have to really, something really weird has to happen to blow the majority of analog stuff. It's just pretty much always soldering.
Yeah. I mean, I've just got it here, got a visual aid if I can stretch this far. I built this lovely thing, the M185, which is disturbingly out of my rack at the moment because I had a leak in my shed last week, and so everything is all over the place. And I've also discovered I've overflowed in like a stupid way in terms of rack space. So I've got a case on order with somebody.
There's no other
Anyway,
way to do it, really, is there?
yeah, you just that's right. I mean, I keep ignoring it, keep putting things in drawers on shelves, and thinking, I don't need another case, don't need another case. And then by the time it turns up, I'll need another one, I'm sure. Yeah. But which is, I mean, that sounds, in some ways that sounds stupid. How much money has he got? I'm in a fortunate position to be sent stuff, and that makes things even more difficult. Anyway, so yeah, I built this thing and it did not work, and it was the first thing I'd built that didn't work first time, and it's a big thing, a major thing, and it was so frustrating. But of course, you think, I've blown the chip, I've blown this, I've blown that, and it just took methodically going around, particularly the IC holders. Actually, no, that's not right, because these are soldered directly to the board. He went IC holderless. So it was the headers then, I think, between the two. I just resoldered and resoldered, and eventually it worked after I'd done enough reflowing and trying again and trying again. There was nothing obvious. I just had to do round a few, spend an hour going around it, and then it came to life.
There's a human problem there, is that like we want to find patterns, so we want to know why something's not working, and you don't get to know most of the time. No, the truth, and that's why people tend to project towards the chip's broken, or they want to know why it's not working. And like you say, sometimes you just keep resoldering anything and it works. You still don't know why it didn't work, and that's not very satisfying on one level. But you have to put that out of your head and then have fun using it. Yeah.
One other visual aid is the other thing I built yesterday, before I did the Stasis Leak, I built this during the day, sample slicer. And this was a kit I bought like 2 years ago. It's the first kit I bought, I think, before I built the Turing machine, because this was on Kickstarter. I thought, that's really interesting. And I think I'll start getting into kits. I bought the kit version, looked at it and thought, I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm going to put this on the shelf. And it stayed on the shelf for a couple of years, unfortunately. But I got it out for this week, built it yesterday, filmed it, all that. I've got all the footage ready to edit it, and I can't get it to work. It almost completely works, as in it will sample, it will play that back. So, fairly there. It's just that the clock won't work. The clock won't change. It just pulses slowly at me. And the clock divider speed thing doesn't seem to do anything, and I cannot get the clock to change when I feed a clock in.
Okay.
It's highly frustrating, and I've now been round this board like 5 times trying to work out what it is that's missing. Although, funnily enough, I did find in doing that there's a whole switch that I hadn't soldered in, and it was only working because it was the sample switch, and you push it down, so it's pushing down onto itself and making a connection. Yeah. So it was working, it just wasn't soldered. But other than that, I still have no clue. I've been in touch with Jan, and he's trying to give me some ideas to work on. But it is, I mean, it's hard. It's hard when that happens, because you are looking forward to the awesomeness of that module, and if it doesn't come together, it is very disheartening. But I'm not disheartened. I'm determined, is what I am.
Yeah, you'll sort it out, I'm sure.
Yeah, I will.
And it will. That sounds like a classic thing where it will be really simple. You just don't know what it is. I mean, when I started THONK, what I didn't know was that. I mean, my background in doing game design was writing a lot of documents and leading people through journeys, and like. I got very good attention to detail for leading people through, to doing something successfully. So, but what I didn't know was, when starting THONK, was whether there'd be a kind of a slow trickle that turned into a tidal wave of people with broken stuff, and that actually it might be a company that seems like a great idea but ends up being it just implode. It would just collapse because mountain of support. And support is our biggest. It's the biggest thing we do. It's as much as shipping, And one of the biggest challenges was persuading people that we weren't going to leave them out to dry. And so from the start, people were surprised where we just replied really quickly, and we might not reply with, "Here's the whole solution," but just telling people, "Look, we're going to help you. Don't worry, we won't leave you in the lurch." And that's not to say some people haven't broken a module, or or that we've made a mistake, but it just goes a long way to let people know that you're going to help them.
Yeah, that's very evident in the whole community, though, isn't it? I mean, so often, sometimes at the point of sale, but most often at the point of support, you are talking to someone who either knows the thing inside out or is the person who made it in the first place. You're talking to the guy who is Ginkgo Synthes, or who is Frequency Central, or who is this, that, and the other. And that's, that's remarkable. I mean, I ordered a new frying pan last week. It turned up on Saturday, and it was dented, and it rocked when you put it on the hob. I mean, I don't know how you dent a frying pan really, but it was. It's taken a week. It's taken a week to get a response, and I've had to fire off tweets. I've had to go via the website. I've had to go through emails, all sorts of different things, just to get a response about a bleeding frying pan. And that would never happen with Eurorack. They're on it, and you often meet these people on Facebook, you see them on Twitter, and they immediately care about their products and are ready to help, regardless of how stupid you feel asking the stupid questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think more people should just go straight to the manufacturer sometimes as well, instead of asking on the internet. But then people do that because they like the social aspect as well.
That's true, yeah.
Sometimes, though, they could probably get a much quicker solution by just asking the person who made it. But I think sometimes I guess it's people who are newer don't realize that they can do that. And actually that person, not everyone, I'm not pretending everyone's brilliant at customer service in Eurorack, because not everyone can be, because they're just one person and they've got 30 jobs to do. But everyone wants the scene to succeed, I think, who's involved in it.
But you put yourself in an interesting position in that you're kind of a third party support level for other people's products, which is a great safety net, at the same time as I imagine being quite difficult, or trying at times. I imagine.
It can be, because it also can confuse people that we didn't necessarily make their kit, or I mean, to be honest, I think with the companies that we have a good relationship with, well, I mean, we have a good relationship with everyone that we sell, but some companies are bigger. So if someone has an issue with a Bifaco module, we're CCing in Jose straight away, and he's going to get back to them, and we know we can let them deal with that and it'll be fine. And if they need us to ship something to the customer, we can do it. But because we do that first, we do that front line of customer service, and we can stop the kind of really common questions getting as far as the manufacturer. It does make us more attractive for manufacturers to sell their stuff through us as well, because send us photos and we can point out that you forgot to solder the pot. And right from when I was talking about why we started, and we were trying to take away the burden of designers going to the post office, it's also that level as well. Send us photos of your build and we'll help you with those things you've missed, kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you have any input into what the manufacturers put into their kits, if that makes sense? As in, do they send you kind of a load of old rubbish? Do you have to say, look, you really need to sort this out, or do you offer that kind of curation?
No, not really curation, but the thing is, it's not always obvious to people which things we do kit and which things we don't. I mean, certainly without naming any names, there's manufacturers we've sold in the past that we don't sell anymore. With some of those issues, I mean, I suppose it does happen in the sense that everybody whose kits we sell, we will really help them source parts at a good price. So if they are using the parts that we're selling, it's a really nice symbiosis of it's good for everybody.
So would they be sending you front panels and PCBs, and you'd be sorting out the rest? Would that be?
Yeah. God,
Right.
there's so many different ways. So, like, you know, from the music thing modular side, where Tom doesn't really deal with anything physical. He sends us the design files, and we arrange all the manufacture and all the purchasing. You know, he just purely does the design. Some people sell us just the PCB, and then we manufacture a panel and do everything else. There's 100 different ways that we work with people now,
and some brilliant.
People, yeah. So whatever works best, really. We try and just do it as a partnership, because everyone has different requirements. So, but we just try and make sure that there's benefits for people selling their products with us that are just beyond the money we pay them, I suppose.
Does that also extend to writing the manuals for them, or?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, not always, because that is a very, very time-consuming thing. And some modules don't warrant it as much as others. You know, it's quite hard deciding what that is, where that some things are really expensive and really complicated, and in a way you don't want to write a beginner's manual for that thing necessarily, because you could lead someone down an expensive mistake. So it is a strategic thing as to decide at what level to document stuff as well, because sometimes we want people to look at the build document and think, actually, this is assuming a level of knowledge that I don't have, and for that to set an alarm bell for them to consider whether it's something they should approach yet or approach later.
Well, that's why it's always good when you have the build docs on the site. I think in the majority of cases, I've always, when I go to look at a product, I can open the build document, on your website, and have a look to consider whether it's something that I could do. And also, you tend to point out whether there's surface mount or not, which is also enormously helpful. Those little things.
We point that out though because people think it's an issue more often than it is. So we don't want people to feel they've been misled on that. I don't know. Anyone doing DIY now is just going to inevitably get more used to doing more surface mount. It's that's just going to happen.
No, I mean I quite like it. I had to embrace it because of the Deckard's Dream, and so it's like, I'm going to have to find a way of doing this. And I was not into the idea of getting an oven, or people were talking about you got a box of sand and you bury the thing and then you set light to it or something. And there's heat guns and paste, and it's like, there has to be another way. And and there is. You can just sort of do it by hand with magnifying glasses on and a pair of tweezers, and it can work. It's just a little bit time consuming and fiddly.
It is, until you get reasonably good at it, and then it's so much quicker. It takes a while, but it is the difference between. It's the learning curve is so different, because not many people are going to get phased by going PCB, one resistor, and see what I'm doing. It's slow, but you can see what you're doing. Whereas that setup thing of using an oven and having to know how to do a ton of stuff before even applying the heat is But there's other. We haven't focused on that kind of surface mount stuff as much, and there's companies like Pusherman who are have gone off more on that tangent, and there's plenty of space for both, really, and more space.
I think ST Modular is another one who does a lot of surface mount. He sells all of his as front panels and PCBs, and I find that just a little bit too scary. I'd quite like to try some out, but I haven't got that far yet. But then that covers the idea of buying components. You see, that's a whole other level. Buying a full kit is brilliant because you have everything in that bag, and you can just pour it out and get stuck in. And when everything's gone, you know that it's pretty much done. But when you've just got a PCB and a front panel, that is another game. I mean, I went through. I probably spent a week trying to source the parts for the Deckard's Dream, and I was at Farnell, I was at RSS, I was at Mouser. you know, because I was assuming I could buy local rather than have to buy from America, and just you would have loved it. Spreadsheet after spreadsheet, pages and pages of these things trying to find this stuff. And in the end, I just bought it all from SynthCube because they did it as a big bundle. And it's like, oh, thank goodness for that, because I just got lost. I had no clue. I didn't know, you know, looking at the page on Mouser, is that the thing that I want? It seems to be similar to the part number of this part number, and it's kind of like the chasm between what I know and what I'm looking at, you know. It was just extreme.
And the photo will be wrong half the time because you've got to know what to read, not what to look at. And you know, the 3 years that led up to THONK starting was me learning how to do all that stuff, really.
Yeah.
But it became really obvious to me that it wasn't necessarily a good use of your time if you want to make music yet. I could see that if you're doing it at scale, then you can do it quite quickly. And so we still get people who say, can you make me a kit for this PCB and panel? And I can understand why they would ask us to make them one kit from what we do, but it just doesn't work. We have to make 50 or 100 for it to make sense from a time point of view. We just can't kit everything. We'd love to, but it's impossible. So there's always a lot of strategy involved in what to kit.
Yeah. Well, one of my chips on my shoulders is about manuals, and I think I, generally speaking, give manufacturers a hard time over their manuals, because I mean, but that's the thing that I'm talking about when I'm in the process of building a module and doing it on camera. All you've got is you, the PCB, and the manual, and that's like a conversation that you're having. And when the manual is not clear, unfortunately, that's the stuff I have to talk about, because that's, to me, that's what's important. If somebody wants to know how you're going to build this thing and wants to see a build through, then those are anything that comes up as a tripwire, I feel totally obliged to highlight. And that's not meant in a, oh, this manufacturer's rubbish. It's meant in a, oh my goodness, I'm going to fall over, I'm not sure what I'm doing. And so I'm assuming that the next person, the person who elected to watch this video about it, is going to have less of an idea than I do. And so if I can highlight all the tripwires, then it's going to hopefully give them a better chance of succeeding down the road, as well as perhaps nudging the manufacturer into the idea that they might need to explain something a little bit more.
I don't think there's any manufacturer who doesn't appreciate that. I mean, obviously the tone of how it's done, I think you do it well, but you know, you're making those manuals are always made at the last minute, where actually you really need to sell this thing now, like, and you do it in a bubble, you're in a cocoon of just, you know, getting it ready, and it's so easy to presume people know what to do, or to assume a level of knowledge. So feedback back like that is really great. And the thing is, again, back to that thing of, if people don't make mistakes, you don't ever get any feedback. We don't want people to make mistakes, but you want there to be a dialogue of, like, here's what you can improve. So people sheepishly approach us with that stuff, actually, kind of like doffing their cap a bit, like, I don't, you know, I'm not complaining, but I thought that this was a bit misleading. And people should please tell us stuff like that, because, you know, there's such a range of skill and experience out there that we need to know about it. So
yeah, and totally, if you're also taking up support for people, then things you've heard before are enormously helpful.
Yeah,
so that it's not the first time they've ever heard that. That's always that's the worst tech support response, and we all do it when you say, oh, I've never heard of that before. It's like, oh no, I want to hear that happens every week, and you know exactly how to solve it. But that's just what happens. So tell us a bit about a bit more about you then. Do you still make music, and what instruments does one use to do that?
2020 hasn't been a particularly productive year for music, I'll be honest. You know, THONK has just been crazy. I spent 15 years solidly making music before starting THONK, and it has tapered off a bit, but that's also because I've got 2 kids as well. but what led me to modular stuff was I always had the Nord modulars.
Oh yeah.
And I just, I fell in love with those. But modular wasn't, late 90s, early 2000s. Dirtful had just kind of come around, but it was quite basic. It was very expensive. It seemed at the time, anyway. So I'd always been involved in kind of the more software modular stuff, and always a lot of very intense digital editing kind of stuff as well, and Max MSP stuff like that. And then in my day job when I was doing sound design for video games, that was dealing with just constant digital editing all day. And so one of the things that led me to not so much DIY but to real modular was getting away from the screen, which is not is pretty much the same for everybody, really, I think. And as a sound designer, it was just a great way of creating quick palettes of interesting sounds as well. But I was more productive in the past releasing music, that's for sure. I did a record on Planet Mu, and I was a bit involved with that label when it was starting up, and then ran a label called Hand on the Plough, kind of the early 2000s. So I have made a lot of music in the past, and now really I don't record so much, but I still love nothing more than to just sit down and patch. I will release music again, but my kids will be up at that point, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder whether if we all hang on for a couple more years, releasing music will be something that will somehow be easier and sorted out by then. It seems to be a kind of in a mess at the moment, and I think many of us are just content with making noises, making a bit of a soundscape that we listen to for a bit, and then we go and patch something else. And we have yeah, go.
Like the thing about the modular is it's not. I think one of the things that people will criticize about it is fair enough, in that there's a lot of kind of people just doing noodly patches.
Sure, yeah.
And they're having a lot of fun, but they're not presenting it as released music. But there's something more like sitting down in an evening with an acoustic guitar and just having 2 hours of fun, going, I've had my fun, and you put the guitar down and you feel satisfied and calm down, and your head is in another place. And I find sitting down with a modular much more like sitting down with a guitar on my own than sitting in front of a computer with a kind of a production mindset of literally trying to produce a finished product. So
yes.
It's more like folk music than pop music, I guess.
No, it is undoubtedly. No, I would totally follow that train of thought. Anthropologically, whether it's it is that pursuit of a soundtrack for your life, I suppose, which is what folk music ultimately is. It's about your place and your environment, and it doesn't have to be something which is commercial. It's something which is local. It's something which is which has meaning to you, and that meaning somehow sometimes intersects with other people's meanings, and we have the electronic nature of it also fuses nicely with the electronic nature of the way that we may put it out there through. So rather than round a campfire in a folky way, we do it in a folky Facebook way. I think there are definite lines you can draw from those ideas of non-commercial community music. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, I'm well into that, I think.
I think I'm glad that things like VCV have appeared as well, because even DIY modular is expensive, and it's still too expensive. Really, it still should be cheaper. That's something we're always trying to make happen. And obviously, if people can't afford the retail stuff, they can do DIY. But it's a struggle for 20-year-olds to afford this stuff. And so something like VCV is a great way into the mindset. and yeah, you're in front of a screen, but you're not dealing with a door and dealing with sync issues and all those things that can destroy destroy your kind of frame of mind.
Yeah, there's something about the fact that they haven't got it quite to work with a door that makes you wonder whether it's actually on purpose for exactly that reason, that it keeps you focused in that space, in that environment for making things.
Well, the nice thing about the hardware modular is you're not in a space where people have an expectation of it is eventually going to fit with their workflow, whatever that is. There aren't the expectations that it should be hosted as a VST, or I think that's one of the battles that you can see the developers of VCV facing, that because it's on a computer, there's a whole stack of expectations of where this product should go, and maybe they aren't the best things for the product always, in terms of its creative potential. And the other great thing about the modular of not being slaved to a clock, not being slave to a not ending up getting your modular in sync with Ableton or whatever, and then finding yourself making another track at 120 BPM and losing the magic of the modular, but also losing what's interesting about the computer as well. I don't think anyone's quite managed to meld those things together in a satisfactory way yet.
I always find myself quantizing whenever I'm recording into a computer. It's inevitable. I can play something with such a groove to it or something, and it just feels great, and then the next day I just have to slap it all onto the grid. Otherwise it starts driving me nuts, and I start editing a tiny bit, and then it all just has to be slapped to that same grid. And I don't feel that at all on the modular. And it's whenever I try to record, I have to try. I mean, what I need now, I need a flipping reel to reel, don't I? That's the only way. Otherwise, I'm recording onto the computer, and I'm going to want to then adjust it. I'm going to want to add a plug-in or something alongside. So yeah, I can see that that's another step down the road. I'm going to end up with some kind of just two tracks. That's fine, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there is a tyranny, isn't there, of like the linear timeline. Like I love working with MPCs as well, and I don't get that feeling from those either. And I don't quite often would compose a beat and not know where the one is, and the one's actually somewhere right near the end of the bar, but not on the one. And then the minute you're like, okay, I'm going to get this into the computer and arrange it, and go, oh God, what? That's the one? That, so yeah, it's a battle with computers.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. So, we've been at this an hour now. I haven't looked at the chat. I'm sorry, everybody, because I'm not facing my computer. I haven't kept an eye on the chat, hardly at all. So I'm sure you've been asking lots of fabulously wonderful questions and throwing loads of money at me, no doubt. But I just haven't been able to appreciate any of that. But what I think we'll do quickly is that you have brought along, or would like to show some of the new stuff that's coming up at THONK. I think people might find interesting. You might give us something else to chat about. Would that be a good move at this point? I'm going to have to look over here in order to do that. Should we do a bit of that?
Yeah, let's do a bit of that.
And this will let me also look at the chat a little bit as we do. So if you have questions, do throw them in, and I may pick on them. They're over here. Or not. Now, just give me a second as I try to work out how on earth I do this without breaking everything. So yeah, tell us about Danny Sound then.
Yeah, I mean, one thing about the COVID craziness this year is we have a real backlog of new products that we're only now starting to get kitted up and get onto the store. So a lot of these images are things that are coming in the next couple of months, and there's a lot of new stuff coming. So we were kind of ready to start getting some of this Danny Sound stuff out what would have been about May time, and then obviously the world exploded, so we got knocked back a bit. But there's 5 modules here. There's the EN129, which is out already. but we kind of soft launched a version 2 of that about
That's
2
the
3
oscillator,
weeks.
yeah?
Yeah, that's the oscillator. So it's a 3.0 analog FM oscillator. It's always sold well, but now on the very bottom left there's a soft sync input, so it's only a minor change, but it's a kind of a version 2, and it just really opens up what you can do with a pair of them, or when you pair it with a Kali oscillator. So that's just a little tweak, but a nice one. And then coming up next in the next couple of months, we've got the looping VC ADSR, which is an ADSR with CV over all the stages and looping modes, and there's a multi-mode ladder filter, which is Danny's kind of version of a mini Moog filter, really, mini Moog, but it's multi-mode, which is less common for Moog filters. And like he's really kind of, we're getting towards a Danny sound system now, and Danny's a keyboard player, so he's what he's quite interested in is the sort of the more East Coast oscillators and the ways of building timbres like that, but with the kind of Moogy keyboard control. And it's quite an interesting place to be, because it kind of fuses those West and East Coast, and really, like with the Moog, when you get your fingers on the keyboard, you kind of go, okay, this is a instrument to be played, and that's
right.
That's what it really feels like with the Danny sound stuff as it's come together. And then, don't think these are going to come out next year, but they're not far off. There's his Dynamics module with the VU meters expander as well, and that is a compressor expander with an EQ section.
You've got to love
really
VU
nice.
meters, though, haven't you? I mean, at any time of the week, you got to have something that's some needles moving is a fabulous thing. So who is Danny Sound then?
Danny Sound is a guy called Danny who used to live here in Brighton. This is where I met him, and he used to work at a kind of a place that was well known to musicians in Brighton for fixing synths. A guy called Gerald, not a guy called Gerald,
Not a guy called Gerald.
not actually a guy called Gerald, no, but a man called Gerald who still fixes a lot of synths in Brighton. And I met Danny through that, and he kind of showed me that he designed this huge semi-modular synth, and this was about 9 years ago. And then we've worked together to help get his stuff to market. So it's been a really good partnership, and he's got a lot more stuff on the way as well.
Cool.
And we would have had a Danny Sound booth, a super booth this year, to present this stuff. So it's been quite a strange year to be all geared up for that, and then have to step back a bit, but it's all still coming out. It's good.
It's a good look, actually. In some ways, when I've seen the oscillator on the site, and it always looked a little bit too posh for a kit somehow.
Yeah.
It looks like Audiophile Circuits League or something of that kind of level. And certainly when you put words like 3.0 on, and it makes it sound, it's complex. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to understand that. So interesting.
Yeah. No, that was always the goal with this stuff. I don't think that the retail stuff has the claim over that kind of high end or aesthetic thing. It can still be DIY behind it.
Yeah, definitely. There is a fruitiness though often to DIY. There is a I don't know. It's almost like it's becoming classic. Like, it's interesting doing the Frequency Central kits, the Stasis Leak. It has a I don't mean to use the word dated, but that's kind of it. It feels like it's an earlier generation of stuff. And that, I don't mean that in any detrimental sense, purely as a visual and the way that aesthetic has developed. Whereas the Robo stuff I'm doing on Friday is very much future looking, very much very modern and up to the minute, I suppose.
Well, it's just, what's quite crazy is that also, I mean, Buchler stuff looked futuristic, but I think the thing about that stuff was no one ever had seen it. It wasn't like it even really existed, because it was so rare that kind of stuff managed to maintain its mystique and still seeming like the future, because no one had even had a chance to get fed up of it, because no one had ever seen it. Same with Surge as well.
Yeah.
And so I think in some ways the scene is over that obsession with stuff that was just simply unobtainable, because everything is becoming quite obtainable in some form right now.
It is. I mean, and even Bookler as well. They are, they are reaching towards us, reaching towards the rest of us, giving us perhaps an opportunity. Although I've not seen any of their Eurorack stuff come through yet, other than there was a guy that was doing not Casper Electronics, was it? No. There was a guy who was doing Booklet modules in Eurorack and was just about sort of launching when they kind of absorbed him and then turned, I think, his stuff into their red label range, red panel range. Yeah. But I still haven't seen any of that come along.
No, I'm not
so
sure.
Far.
But then I people might think I'm like totally over what everyone else is doing, but it's just so big now that it's impossible to keep track of what everyone's doing.
Yeah, no, too true. Do you want me to go through these in order? Is that helpful? Or I think next we've got an adapter, so that's exciting. Let's have a look at that.
It does sound exciting, doesn't it? This is a classic THONK product. One of the it's very. Oh, I'm not sure this is playing. Oh, there you go. So it is simply a little brass adapter that lets you fit different knobs on different pots. And it's the sort of thing that people get. It's just so cheap and not interesting, but people get really excited about it. And it's because sometimes you can't finish a module because you haven't got the right pot on the right knob, and it's the simplest, most boring thing in the world, but it just unlocks those situations where people are frustrated. So
nice.
Like one of the biggest interactions we had on social media last year was when we released black pot nuts and washers. People went crazy for them.
Yeah. I know Burfaco's had that experience with the black and red ones that they've done as well.
Yeah,
it's we like that stuff. We like that stuff. Also got some slider caps.
Yeah, so we do a range of these SOFAM black slider caps, and we're doing them in white and grey and cream, and they've been really popular. And they people can pimp out their other non-DIY modules with them as well. So yeah, they're coming. They'll be popular, I think.
Yeah. So all right. So here's a question for you. Back to this fella.
Yeah.
My major criticism, one of the few criticisms I would say, is that you can't see these sliders once you're in a live situation. And these aren't sliders, they're switches. And I tried to get some slider caps and I can't get anything, haven't found anything that's fitted it yet.
Yeah.
So I want some of those. I want something to go over those. Something red or something.
A few different sizes of those ones at the moment are the ones that fit on the LED sliders.
I had some WMD ones I seem to recall.
Oh, the kind of little transparent condoms.
Yes, exactly.
We're going to do a range of, not quite that, but switch caps as well in a range of different colours, and they sometimes fit onto some of the smaller sliders, because those small square spiky switches and sliders aren't the most appealing things to wiggle about sometimes. So some people really prefer that. We could move on to the proc.
Oh no, well that's not next on my list.
That's okay. No, I think we missed it out. I think we'll go back to it.
Okay.
But this is so again, this is something that should have come out in about May time, and then
I saw that knocking around near Super Booth.
Yeah, it's probably about a month away now. We just had a ridiculous, there's just been some really weird part shortages this year that have come out of certain factories in the Far East, shutting for ages. So it's been a bit frustrating, but this one is coming soon.
And this is like a macro controller, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's. I think that what Tom's idea behind this was that, the whole miniaturization thing is fine, but sometimes you really do want to have really nice fine control over stuff, and that doesn't necessarily need to be on that module itself, so it's an exploring module. It's like you create a territory, you create a geography with it, with these 4 knobs, and there's just direct outputs from them, but there's also the change and difference outputs, which create different levels based on the levels of all 4 controls. And it's not for kind of really precise idea. You don't. It's not the sort of thing you approach with a really strict idea of what you want to achieve. It's something to experiment with and find. If you've got a kind of self-generating kind of patch and just plugging this in and using it as your major influence over it. So it's really fun. It's one of those ones. It's so simple. It's hard to describe sometimes, but.
Well, that's Tom's gift, though, isn't it? He puts simple things together. You just go, well, why has nobody ever thought of that before? It's like I've got the startup something, I don't know, and it's got a tap tempo and a clock on it, which is the most extraordinarily useful thing I think ever. And it's built into a module that has no business being there, but it just is, as well as. Rather than having to mix stuff together, you just choose an input depending on how loud your thing is. It's just a lovely, simple thing to have on the end of a row, particularly of a self-contained row, so that you can listen to it and plug it in. It's just
get working. Just
exactly.
And also we've all found ourselves with a lovely patch, and you're kind of delving through the patch cables trying to turn some tiny little trimmer, and it's easy to forget that that's not conducive sometimes. So this is a way out of that.
Although one thing I would like to see is on an output module like that, it's just a little SD card recorder. It's just the ability to hit record. Do you know what I mean? On your output. I'm not trying to. I don't want to multi-track it. I don't want to this, that, and the other. I just want to.
Well, 4MS have made it. Yeah, there's not quite a DIY solution. Oh, I think there might be some DIY solutions that we don't sell, but 4MS made a very simple SD card WAV recorder with just a stereo in and out. So you could have that right at the end of your chain. Yeah, that does satisfy that.
Okay, coming next. Oh, look, there's the man himself. Look, God bless him. Now, hang on. Yes. I might have this. Yeah,
so Mini Drive is another module coming out in a few months. This is going to be a really beginner friendly module. Let's hear what Tom says.
Hang on.
What I actually want to do is
hang on, that's a bit loud.
Just take something old and make it slightly smaller and put it into my rack. So what this actually is it's the drive is the external input from a Mini Moog. And it has a little incandescent light at the top that kind of flashes like the one on the front of a Mini Moog. And it's terrible as an external input. If you want to plug a guitar into it, it sounds awful. But it's basically I've been using it just as a drive circuit. So it's really nice as a kind of warmer, a drive. And it doesn't, to me, I've never studied those kind of drive circuits and that stuff in much detail, but it sounds really nice and sounds kind of unusual. And once you have a few of them, or once you have one, you want to have kind of 3 or 4 of them with just everything kind of pulsing through it. So that was, I don't know if people are going to want that, but it was something that I designed kind of very much for myself, and it seems to work nicely. So again, that's probably something that THONK will be doing as a DIY kit, not with a hideous bright blue knob on it. Of course, that is not part of the design. That's just what I happen to have.
Tom's too modern
when I was making the prototype. So those...
he always says,
"What is it again?"
He always says, "Oh, I don't know if anyone will want this," and I'm like, "Yeah, everyone's gonna." It is. It's the input section on a Mini Moog, which was not a high quality kind of input, but happened to be one of those things where the distortion and saturation sounds lovely.
Yeah.
which I believe is related to the gold. It's like a real little,
Oh, I lost you there.
oh,
There we go.
you got me.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very nice sounding distortion module with a very pretty flashing light on it.
Nice. Nice.
We think it'd be a really nice beginner kit. Like, we pushed people towards Tom's microphony as a nice beginner kit for quite a long time, and we think we're going to kind of push it in that space because it's a nice.
Oh, the little
distortion.
microphone thing. No,
Yeah.
this like ears.
Yeah, contact
Tappy
mic.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I got you.
You know, which is it's a lot of fun, but a distortion module is a bit more mass market perhaps as well. Everyone loves a bit of distortion. So.
Yes, indeed.
It's very pretty. I haven't got a video, but we'll have them soon.
This, hang on, where am I? This one
Should we go
here.
back up to the proc one?
I don't know if I have a link to that.
On the third line, I think.
Oh yeah, look at that. YouTube with audio. Right, wait.
This could be very loud. This.
Okay, let me just gotta make it a thing with that. Put that in there. Ba, ba, ba. So, oops, no. That, oh, yeah, okay. Let's see if I can get something on that.
We are the TV version of the proc drum modules, and we're giving it away. We are selling it, but we're giving it away for free as well to anyone who's bought the hardware. And alongside that, there's a new proc firmware release as well. And the way that you get the free version of VCV is through using the tool that also gives you the new firmware for the modules as well. So,
all right. Does a firmware? Is it because I mean, I always get the impression that they're interchangeable, that you could run any of them as any of them. But is that actually true, or are they specific?
And we've not really given people a nice way of doing that until now. But the firmware tool allows you to turn your bass drum into a snare drum for as long as you want, and they're reprogrammed to a hi-hat or a hand clap. So you can't do that live while you're running the module, but you can try out all the different firmwares, and then if you decide you want to buy another module, you can. And there's an exclusive firmware called THONK as well, which is kind of a rim shot percussion generator as well. So it's a really nice bunch of free stuff.
It's a nice idea. At this sort of cross fertilization between VCV Rack and hardware is really interesting. It makes every time I see something come out in VCV Rack, it's kind of like, oh no, but I want it to be exclusive. I have to spend money on hardware. It has to be hardware. How dare they put this thing into software? And then you think, wow, it's really quite fascinating. And if you are a VCV Rack user, then that's going to be extraordinary. You know,
it's really interesting. Yeah. I thought there would be more crossover. I mean, I knew about the VCV and I'd used it, but doing this proc stuff as we dived more into the VCV community, there's a lot less crossover between the audiences than I'd imagined, and it's its own thing. It's its own separate thing, and obviously some people kind of get into the hardware stuff after being into VCV, and vice versa as well. But it's fascinating because it's its own thing. It's not slavish to the Euro stuff at all.
No, indeed. I mean, some of the patches that people do are extraordinary and very sort of unmodular. Sorry, just changing my light battery. In as much as, because in some ways it occupies its own space. It's not hardware modular. It doesn't give that full experience, but it's also it's not the normal way software works either. So you have these phenomenally large patches full of the sort of modules you can never afford to buy that many of. And so it manages to somehow have its own space, in a different place to Softube Modular, which is very much trying to desperately nail the hardware experience. It floats around in a different place, and there's definitely people who give themselves over to all of that, I think.
Yeah, and it reminds me of going back to the Nord modular stuff. It's more it doesn't do the same thing actually, because when you have practically infinite VCAs and mixers, there's very different ways of achieving stuff that you simply couldn't do in hardware as well. So it's very cool.
Yeah. Yes. Where were we? We did that. We could look at Plinky, yeah.
This is just to make it complicated again, is a Twitter video.
Yes.
It's very quiet. Yeah, we're not really getting the audio on that, but but Plinky is designed by a guy called Alex Evans, who has spent the last 20 years or so making very high profile video games, and he was the tech director of a company called Media Molecule till recently, and he worked on other games, Bullfrog and Lionhead as well, and he's been. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
He's kind of he was a THONK customer and kind of getting into building instruments in his spare time, and he's made something really quite special with this. I think the way he described it was a kind of a handheld, melancholy jamming headphone box, and it's a very beautiful little handheld instrument, and it's going to be on sale on THONK probably maybe just this year, maybe just into next year. But it's very cool. It's a lovely thing to stick headphones on and just play with the pressure. He's got some really nice kind of CS80 Vangelis Blade Runner patches in there where you find yourself sitting for 30 minutes sort of playing the Blade Runner soundtrack. So yeah, it
looks completely nuts. Well, it doesn't look it looks, it's a weird looking thing. I mean, is the synthesizer side of things something you've always been interested in, or has it just been a byproduct?
What, for myself?
No, for THONK, it's sort of mainly Eurorack, or would you see it as a Eurorack and synthesizer DIY type place? Yeah,
definitely a synthesizer place. And Eurorack's just been the place where there's a lot of there's just a lot of attention at the moment. But I'm certainly interested in instruments that you can't use to make normal music. Might even thwart you if you try and make normal music with them. That's an appeal. That's an appeal of the modular thing. But I don't. It's DIY synths, and that Plinky thing does actually fit into Euro. It's shown there in a standalone case, but it does function as a module as well. It is interesting though. Standalone stuff for us doesn't sell nearly as well as Euro stuff. So
yeah, interesting. And to those who are taking notes out there, somebody mentioned how they couldn't hear us very well, so I just turned us up, which of course has ruined all those people who've turned all of their system up to hear everything, and it's now too loud. I am sorry, I just had to make an executive decision.
It might be me not speaking loud enough as well. I'm murmuring.
No, it's all right. We are a little low, but I think we can cope with that. So that's a thing with a thing. Oh, look, Frequency Central.
Yeah,
we have a couple of things from them.
Yeah, these are actually going to be. These were modules that we were talking to Rick at Frequency Central about. There not being enough logic at the moment in DIY, and so he's worked on a couple of logic modules that they're going to be exclusive kits on THONK, I think, for the rest of this year. RYO Roll Your Own did a really nice set of logic modules, but they kind of disappeared. They've actually just been bought by SynthCube, so you can still get some of the RYO stuff there. But we love logic. It just it really knits everything together for making interesting rhythms and stuff. So, and Rick's got a really good, I don't know, he's got a bit like Tom. He's really good at focusing on a specific feature set and not getting distracted by too many bells and whistles, and just getting it down to its core feature. So we're looking forward to getting those out.
Cool. I mean, logic and switches as well is something that I've dabbled in, but I've not fully grasped yet. I probably need to do a everything you need to know about logic type video, because then that's the way I learn things, is by over promising. I'm going to do a video on something, then I have to learn how it works. And so
maybe you should over promise to do a video about these two Frequency Central modules then.
Yeah.
At the minute you've got more than a few sequencers and more than a few things that generate trains of triggers and anything like that, then your opportunities, once you start connecting those things together with logic to make interesting polyrhythms and add a lot more rhythmic interest, it's the place to go, really.
Nice. I will understand that at some point. It's weird because I did electronics at school like 100 years ago, and it was all about AND gates and NAND gates, so I understand it from that point of view. It's just musically is where I go, what am I doing exactly? But then you
don't. I don't know. They are. I mean, sometimes it's to do with the design of the module, but you really just start patching things in and listening to the output and switch. You don't really need to understand. It does help if you have some idea of what you want to achieve sometimes, but particularly the module on the left, the reset simulation, you're just putting an A input in and a B input, and then you can just monitor what's coming out and just see what you like. So you don't have to understand the way the Boolean gates work at all. You can just jam them.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah.
That's what I like to hear. Next up, now these don't look like...
These aren't Eurorack modules, are
No,
they?
this is something else. That's that weird 500 series stuff.
It is, yeah. And so there's this company, DIY recording equipment in the States, and we've kind of known about them for quite a while because they sit in a similar space to THONK, but for the 500 series kind of pro audio stuff, and they approached us at the end of last year, very early this year, about becoming their European distributor. So we are going to start selling this stuff, and it's very similar in a lot of ways, being modular and DIY, but it's a very different market. So I mean, I just pulled out those two modules in particular. There's a kind of a high-end opto compressor and a sort of classic passive EQ, a bit like that EQ, a Pultec or something like that. So they're not.
Oh, you see, there's the flaw in your plan though, because you're going to have to deal with pro audio guys, and pro audio guys are going to expect you to know your Pultecs from your what's it. Are you prepared, do you think, for a whole nother level of nerdedness?
I am, and to be fair, I used to. I'm out of practice, but I do know about that other world of nerdiness as well. And obviously, and obviously, my own desire to get my hands on these things help as well. But, yeah, it seems to fit in well. Yeah, it's not CV controlled, which is a crazy departure for us, but everyone likes to have a nice bit of, or might think they want to have a nice posh bit of outboard at the end. So yeah, it just seems to fit in, and they're really nice company, very similar kind of ethos to us in terms of getting people through builds and documenting them well. So it seems like it'd be a nice fit, and they have a loyal audience, and shipping prices to and from the States they never go down, that's for sure. So it's a nice fit. So that'll be coming quite soon.
Interesting. Is it digitally controlled at the back? The cases that they go into, does that end up with some kind of digital controller, or is it just analog?
No, this is
ultimately
these two particularly pure analog, and I don't think there's much, if any, digital at all. No, it's
okie doke. Tubes.
Tubes. Yeah. So a new module from 12 Squan, who it's always been popular, the stuff we've done of theirs, and it's a output section. It's a dual tube stereo output. So knowing 12 Squan, it will go from a warm throbbing into a just total destruction. Fans of his stuff, they know what they like. So yeah, more of the same, and that is going to be out before Christmas. And he has a bunch of other new modules which are all going to be DIY as well. May not all come out this year, but yeah, plenty on the way from Gale at 12 Squan.
Are they usually the sort of red modules that I see on your site?
Originally all red, and then he's kind of developed like a silver and red kind of design. But the last few modules, I think it's his stereo modules are black.
Okay.
But I might be wrong. But that's the pattern so far.
Artist impression of a module.
Yeah, Shack Mat. They've got also again all their retail modules are all going to be DIY as well, which is nice. Which isn't always the case with some manufacturers who do both. And yeah, this is a crazy quadraphonic processor, alias seeds and mixer, and they're also, I think, doing the 4-brick Rook as well, hopefully in DIY. So yeah, this Shack Mat stuff's really popular, and they're really good at getting a really deep feature set, but not giving you a complex way of controlling.
Somebody is asking the chat to the price of the tube output thing.
I don't know, but I think probably a bit more than the Strackhalt Orsal, which is quite similar to, which is the other 12 Scorn tube module. We haven't worked out the final pricing, but it's mid-range 12 Scorn.
Ah. Now this one I know a tiny bit, in that I'm hopefully getting hold of one of these myself to do a video on very, very soon. It's essentially a small Lyra, part of a Lyra 8, maybe a Lyra 4, maybe a Lyra 3. Would that be fair?
Yeah, it is. It's a kind of cut down, a more compact version of the Lyra, but with that same, really nice responsive touch control, and offers a lot of possibilities for kind of patching into your modular as well, and using it to control other stuff. So yeah, it's quite straightforward, but it's nice to see that lovely Lyra touch thing come to in a smaller package.
Yeah, and it's from Neutron
Neural
Labs, thank you, and who have mostly done sort of loops and sound packs up to now. So this is quite a leap into hardware for them, I think.
Yeah, it is. And this is one of the the funny thing about coronavirus. There aren't really many funny things about coronavirus, but one of the byproducts of it were people finishing a lot of projects that they hadn't had time to finish. And so we've actually, other people are selling this as well. Other stockists have already got it on sale, but this was one that kind of came in April at quite a tricky time. So it's been a long time coming to get it on sale, but yeah, it's another one that's going to come in the flow of products in the next few weeks.
Great. Something to do with Waveform magazine?
Yeah, we're going to start stocking Waveform magazine. It's really, that's it really. It's just a really nice magazine. Really, we put a lot of care into it and always interview interesting people. So yeah, we're going to be carrying that on THONK.
Nice.
We like magazines, so yeah.
A bit of Bastel.
Bastel are they've been consolidating their range recently as they're changing and focusing on new stuff, and quite a lot of the older modules have been discontinued now, and because there was a lot of them, and it's hard to keep focus with that baggage, I think, sometimes. So yeah, they're moving towards their stuff being in this kind of their newer black panel style.
I think it's a good thing. I mean, Bastel was one of the companies that were really helpful and nice to me when I first started, and I'd always thought I would have some Bastel modules, but then I just couldn't seem to get my head around the wood, the way that it would look so completely different in my rack. Not that I've got things of all sorts of different colors. It's not that. It's just that it was so different and so out there, and I could never quite nail down exactly what it was that any of them did, and so I could never find exactly a module that would fit a particular purpose that I was after. But I've really liked the stuff they've done with Casper Electronics. I've liked I picked up the one thing I have picked up from them is the Compass, which was the strange probability based trigger creator thing.
I think they're one of those companies, and there's not many of them around, but them and nonlinear circuits, and I don't know, they do a lot of modules, and it might not be very easy to tell what they do, but they're one of those companies where you might get one and just go, oh, hang on, this is really different.
Yes.
This is like anything else, and it there's a whole world in here, and I think their modules are quite often like that. And so people can get quite obsessive about them once they realise they're it's a different terrain.
They have a bit of a vibe to them. That's the thing. I mean, I've having spoken to them a bit and found out a bit about them. They sort of work as a cooperative and a community, and that feeds into that whole aesthetic they used to have. But it is interesting that they're now changing, and there's probably a change of I don't know, intention somehow is what it feels. It's almost like they've had to take a decision. Are we just doing this for sort of shits and giggles, or are we doing it for to try to make some kind of living and something bigger out of this? And perhaps
maybe enjoy it more as well. I'm not speaking for them, but it's the thing is they rode, I think for them and us and lots of companies who rode the explosion. The explosion is very attractive in its own way, and they literally had an explosion of modules. Like, it just was so much stuff, and that's a really fascinating thing to do, but it's not a very interesting thing to support forever, and it it's really easy to have all of your R&D time sucked away by support of older stuff. And so I think it's a really smart decision to discontinue stuff and get the knife out and cut parts away, and fill the gaps in with something else. So yeah, it's a smart move.
Yeah, nice one. Nice one. No,
yeah.
I have no clue.
Yeah. So it's an ornament and crime. Have you got an ornament and crime?
I do not. On purpose, there's some modules I don't have, and that's one of them, because everyone keeps saying you should get an ornament and crime, and I go, it doesn't speak to me from a position of, I don't know, as a human being, as a musician. It doesn't. I'm sure there's wonderful things within it, but there's nothing about it which presses any buttons with me.
Yeah. It's definitely it definitely sits in that that multifunction world, like a disting or something like that, where it's one of those things that I think is incredibly useful for people who are gigging and want to make the absolute most they can out of their two rows.
Yeah.
And want to have a lot of flexibility and want to have as much reusability as they can. And it as a platform, I think Ornament Crime has been refined to be one of those, Swiss Army knife kind of modules. So, and yeah, it's funny because Plum are a company like ST Modular as well that really focused a lot on surface mount stuff, but they could see also that there's this whole people who prefer through hole, and they hadn't really had an Ornament and Crime position towards them, and so they kind of filled this space with THONK in mind, actually.
Nice.
So that was nice.
Yeah, and as someone who says in the comments, for ADSRs with CV over stage doesn't speak to you. No, it doesn't. I don't care what the functionality is. It's like my poor old disting over there. That I dig it out when I have a problem to solve, and I need a particular thing. Then I dig out the manual and I scan through it trying to find the right algorithm. Then I have to go back and try to work out how do I use this thing again, and then find the right algorithm, etc., etc. And the Ornament and Crime is a similar deal. It's got fantastic functionality without any doubt, but there's nothing about its front end that makes me go, woohoo, look at this, a new module. So
I think part of it as well is it might be a young man's game.
Maybe. Oi!
I'm including myself in that. There's a lot of stuff, and I think, you know what, when I was 20, I would have learnt that inside out. And I have a very different set of expectations and goals now. I don't get as much pleasure from learning something really complex inside and out necessarily as I used to, but I'm sure it's not just age. But
no, it's just I've done enough menu diving in my life, you know what I mean. So it's just something that doesn't particularly interest me, and I'm sure if I had one, I would get into it and do those things. Although I said that about the disting, and I still haven't. It's being a reverb at the moment, and that's all right. I'm happy for it to do that, and that's okay. But now I've got my Stasis Leak. I don't need that anymore.
I've realised that comment for me about being a young man's game, that's going to live with me forever now. People are going to bring that up forever. I've doomed myself.
Yeah, maybe. But that's it. I mean, so it's something that you said earlier about 20-year-olds being able to afford this stuff. It's like they shouldn't be able to bloody afford it. I'm 50 this year, and I can own, and it's now that I'm beginning to be able to afford it. It's that or a motorcycle.
The great thing is that the second-hand market will provide. I mean, there's just such a there's going to be 20-year-olds who are picking up a system of Bastel modules in 10 years, right? That might not cost them much at all, and in that way that all the Roland stuff, once it became affordable mid-80s, and you could still buy an 808, or kids were picking those up and making new genres. So I don't know, there's a lot of synths around, and they're gonna be around a long time, and people are going to be using them in 10-20 years for totally different things. So that can only be good.
So, as a dare I say, as a retailer, dare I mention the Behringer word, and how do you have any thoughts on their mission, I suppose, or whatever it is that they seem to be doing? I'm always interested in thoughts on that.
I feel lucky that I'm not directly touched by their presence, but it only in a competitive sense. I mean, really, I mean, they are putting modules out which can be cheaper than the DIY equivalent, and I suppose that is something, that could concern me. But I'm not seeing an effect from that. But I mean, they're also putting a lot of chips out into the world as well.
Yeah.
So it's I don't like the way they operate. I'm not going to pretend I do. But on the flip side, I just don't have a problem with people being able to afford interesting and nice gear. So it's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like the gatekeepery nature of musical instruments, and I don't like the way that price becomes a gatekeeper as well. So it's a tricky problem. It's just that you do have to make a lot of shortcuts to release stuff cheaply as well. And we'll probably find out in 10 years which synths are still working or not. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I find their approach to Eurorack very strange. It's almost like somebody had an idea and they went with that, and then they've sort of forgotten what the point of it all was. So they've cloned a couple of old systems that nobody really has anymore. Of course, some people will jump up in the chat and say, "Oh no, I've got a system 100, etc., etc." That's fine, but old systems that use old ways of doing things that we've kind of got past and moved beyond now. So they're replicating something which people don't use very much, and putting it out really cheap, so that beginners can then buy themselves into something which isn't particularly well suited to expanding into a greater Eurorack. So it just seems odd, and I'm not quite sure that they've really thought it through. It would have been far more interesting if they'd released their own versions of Moog filters and Oberheim filters and this sort of stuff. They had a bit more of a game plan, but just to replicate the Roland stuff and then the Moog system, it's just slightly odd. It just seems slightly odd. And I mean, and now they're doing the 2500, which is the oddest one of them all, because a 2500 is the sort of system that you would talk to ARP about over months, who would then design this enormous thing that would fill a room. And now we've condensed that down to a couple of rows of Eurorack, but it doesn't comprehend itself, because that's not what the 2500 was, if you know what I mean. So the whole thing has just got a bit odd.
Yeah, it is odd. I mean, I think I know I think probably a lot of manufacturers, the more the smaller Euro manufacturers do feel very threatened by it. But you look at what happened in pedals, and Behringer cloned every Boss pedal out there, but it's a very crowded space, the pedal space, but there's still a lot of very healthy boutique pedal companies. So I did, like, the thing is, like, I THONK and the DIY scene, I know, can keep expanding, and every time I think we might be plateauing, I realise that there's something in the way that people are operating that is just limiting the market. So I think the market is still big enough for Behringer to be there as well.
Yeah, I think so. And it hasn't made the splash that I expected it to. But then some of that is also in the way they've been releasing them, which is kind of in drips and drabs, which again makes no sense. I mean, if you were to buy a Roland System 100 modular system, you wouldn't buy one module, you would buy a system. Yeah. Excuse me. And Behringer haven't really enabled you to do that. And they also don't curate it in that way either, because you have to go to Thomann or whatever shop you buy it from, and you have to find them, first of all, within the catalogue, and then pull out the bits that you think you need. Whereas in my view, what they should be selling is a case full, a system that has all the bits, including a lovely manual to show you how to work it. You know, I think it's. I can't quite understand what they're hoping to do. It seems a strange thing.
Yeah, and as much as Roland and Korg might be threatened by them, and as much as we can all criticize what Roland and Korg do as well. Sometimes they do some things that are great still. They're just so good at getting people to buy into their products and understand them and continue supporting them along the way. And they're so good at that. And Behringer aren't. So
yeah, fair enough. Although the 2600 is in production now, I heard today, and that's perhaps a little bit more interesting because I don't ever imagine myself earning an ARP 2600, even the Korg one. That's those sorts of things are out of reach, and that then becomes a useful way of getting access to the sort of synthesizers that people can't get access to. So in that respect, they become a useful company that's able to supply that. I just wish they'd do it with a little bit more humour and humanity. That's all. Ultimately.
Yeah.
Right. So where are we? That's 2 hours, mate. We've stuck this out for. That's pretty good going. Shall we see if there's any burning questions in the chat to see if there's any last minute bits and pieces? Somebody asked earlier on actually if there's any books you would recommend on electronics.
There's a really good book. Oh, this is going to test my memory now. The guy. So there was a really good book by the guy who did Music from Outer Space.
Oh,
Ray
yeah.
Wilson. Search for Ray Wilson and synth design, and that's really nice. There is, so I'm Googling, so I remember.
Yeah, put you on your spot now.
There's a really good book if you want to do stuff like make really nice EQs and mixers and things like that. There's a book called Small Signal Circuit Design, I think. If it, I can if people shoot me questions about these, I can remember the actual names of them afterwards. But I don't know that I'd probably books are good, but I'd probably dive into some of the groups on Facebook. In all honesty, there's a really good group that started recently, which is called Synth DIY for non-engineers.
Somebody mentioned that today. It's the first time I'd seen that. I hadn't come across them before.
Yeah, the kind of ethos of that group is don't belittle people who are learning, and don't sometimes a horrible hack isn't a great way to get something working. So not that frankly the communities are belittling or anything like that, but it's nice because it's just a kind of different kind of space for people to get into DIY.
I think that's great. I mean, we do. It's a human trait, or maybe it's an English trait, that we do take the piss out of ourselves and out of each other a little bit, and I can be guilty of that if people ask what seems to be an overly simple or obvious question. I can sometimes make fun of that, maybe, but only because it's kind of, I don't know, as I say, it's because we're English, because we're human, but it's also, we need to remind ourselves that people do ask stupid questions because they just don't know, and that's okay. It's okay to be in that position of not knowing, and we need to remember not to lose our warmth when we do. I'm talking to myself really, of to respect that, even if we do take a little bit of fun, because that's inevitable. But we just have to answer the question.
Yeah, and there is a monopoly of knowledge sometimes in the hands of white Western men, English-speaking men, or Europeans and Americans, and so or at least maybe they're the people shouting loudest. So I think one really nice thing about that group is it's more inclusive, perhaps, than other groups.
Great.
Which is important.
No, definitely. So I've ignored all the questions so far. Books on troubleshooting. No one's ever going to help you with that, Jeff. You're all in the same boat. You've just got to resolder it and resolder it again, and then put it to one side. And as Steve said, come back in the morning.
Found a good book on troubleshooting. No, sadly, someone should write it.
Will you guys be getting more of the sorcery, MIAW stuff, or Cosmo format?
I think probably Cosmo format, maybe not, because Sam is doing a great job of that himself. But the sorcery, we sell one product by sorcery at the moment, but yeah, we are looking at their wider range. Was there something particular that caller was asking for?
Difficult to say. Chent, if you have more to say, then let us know. Yeah, to have the confidence to ask the daft question. Yes, you do. You should do. I mean, we've all had to do it. I had to do it, and I still feel silly when you ask. Asking on forums are scary places. Muff Wiggler, the scariest of them all, and it's not a place that I spend any time. I have to say, I just don't feel comfortable there. I find it a difficult place to have a conversation without feeling stupid. And that's me. I'm not saying that that's them necessarily. That's just how it is. But for me, Facebook has been enormously helpful for this sort of thing, and those Facebook groups. Eurorack DIY has been useful. Other places like that.
I do hate to recommend Facebook groups over something like Muff Wiggler that is independent and not slaved that model. But forums are very deep, hard to get inside places. They're not good for beginners, to be honest. They were better when they were a lot smaller, but they're so big now that the signal to noise is hard.
Yeah, and that's not to talk Muff Wiggler down either, because they do a bloody good job of what they do, and they do that very well. But there's a certain level of language and level of understanding which is largely required. Although that again, not necessarily. It's just the general experience that you get, and because it's an older forum as well, it feels dated and old and all those sorts of things, which can be a barrier of entry for people. But give it a go by all means. But also, I've had good results from Facebook and other things. Also, asking generally on Twitter, you'll be surprised you get a reply from.
And I've got, I've sort of pulled back from Facebook. I have 0 friends on Facebook, and I'm just members of groups. Yeah, for me. I do the THONK page on Facebook, and I'm just members of groups on there. You don't have to. And actually, all I get is really interesting group posts come up. As much as I might want to see friends' baby photos, that's not what I go to Facebook for. So it is okay. And it's terrible, but okay.
Yeah. But I mean, you have to imagine that any system which is vastly the majority of male white is going to have its issues, and that's just something that we have to suffer at the moment. Hopefully these things do change and are changing, and things evolve over time. Certainly in just the 3 or 4 years that I've been looking seriously at Eurorack and synthesizers, I have seen great changes in place to hopefully make places more inclusive, more beginner friendly, but more diverse friendly as well, which has been great, because it's not, it is predominantly white male, and that is a thing.
It's a long road, but at least it's moving in the right direction.
It finally is, yeah. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Never be afraid to ask questions. But we won't always get the answer that you were after. But keep at it, because for every arsehole, there's always going to be a few good people. Yeah. So that looks. I think that looks good. We're probably feeling that we're coming to a natural end. See, I'm talking to you to the side of your face again. Very safe around. Which is cool. So, Steve, do you have anything else that you would like to bring? You'd like to offer to the community at this time? 50% discount code, maybe, or any other pearls of wisdom?
No, I thanks to everyone for sticking with us. It's been I've worried in the past few months that having to limit how much stuff people can buy, which feels really weird, and stuff like that would generate bad will, and it hasn't. Everyone's been very supportive, but then everyone's going through a similar situation, so I think people are a bit more empathic right now than they were in the past, perhaps. So that's been really nice to have that support, and things are getting sort of back to normal.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Robin, and good luck with your build tomorrow. What are you building tomorrow?
Tomorrow is Cosmo night, and in fact, during this live stream, I just got an email from Sam saying he might well be available to pop into the video tomorrow. So that's exciting. I'll just have to firm that up with him in a minute. But I was hoping that would be the case. But he's such a crazy, busy person that it's impossible to book things with him. But he's hoping to pop in, which is great because I'm confused about the whole Cosmo thing, and it would be great to have some advice on what the hell that's about. So that's cool. So tomorrow night is Cosmo, which is the oversized Eurorack of Sam Battle's design to some degree, or borrowing from other people, I think. So that's tomorrow. And then Friday night, we're building the Robo 3PT. Hopefully you've bought all your kits from THONK by now for that, which is going to be cool. I've got that here, in fact. No, I haven't. I've lost it. No, there it is. That fella. That's the one.
Cool. Yeah.
So that hopefully will go a little bit easier than the Stasis Leak did. Not that it was difficult. It was just like the first time trying to do a live build along was a little bit kind of, It took me half an hour to solder the first thing. I think that was part of the problem. So this hopefully should be a bit straightforward. So that's going to be interesting. And I'm also interested to find out what it does, because it's a bit of a multifunctional module, I know, but it does have really nice flashing lights, and that's always a good thing.
And no menus, so
no menus. And then yes, and then Saturday going to do a bit of Deckard's Dream. Not sure what that's going to involve, but I'm going to try and get one of the voice cards
done. Going to finish it?
No, there's no way. I've still got all the voice cards to do. I mean, that's something like 500 surface mount and 500 resistors and 500 this, that, and the other. So there's a fair bit to do, but it'll be good to get it down off the shelf and lay it all out and have a look and see where we are. I think that would be good for Saturday. And then I'm feeling more and more like Sunday night we should just get together and have a chat about it all. But we'll see. But obviously, building stuff is a continuing process, and I have a lot more things to do. So, Steve, thanks ever so much for coming on our show. It's been really interesting getting to know you a bit more, getting a face, because there are no pictures of you on the internet. You are very, you've kept yourself away from the cameras somehow. And so it's good to find out what you look like, and to find that face behind THONK. And it always helps to make things more human somehow. Because shops are always just feel like they're trying to piss you off all the time, whereas that's not really the case. And my experience of THONK is that it's always been awesome, and it's always useful, always finding the bits that I need, and great. It's been a great source of kits, and you've always been very helpful. So I'm very appreciative of that. And long may it rain. No, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for all your great videos as well. And let's both keep going.
Let's keep at it, mate. Keep going for as long as we can. Right, so so thanks everyone for joining us. I hope that's been useful and helpful to you. If they've got any burning questions, stick them in the comments later on, and I'll see that Steve gets them. And otherwise, hopefully I'll see you tomorrow for the Cosmo stuff, or later in the week, and if not, I'll see you next time when it happens. So thanks very much, and good night. If I can find the button to make it stop, we will do that. Good night.
See you later.
Thanks everyone.
Bye bye.